Hi guys, welcome to the Lit Mag Lab podcast. This is Vevna Forrow. Yeah, let's get started. Okay guys, so previously on the podcast, I discussed plagiarism and how there are a lot of imposters out there or individuals who pretend to be, someone else or use fake names and or copy bios and things like that and try to pass work off as their own. And it is very destructive to the Lit Mag, community and space overall. And yeah, so listen back to that episode. I just touched based on, how, I typically, screened poems for things like that and how others in the community perhaps do so as well. But yeah, always a good idea to double check and always, before setting out any decisions, always, screen the poem for any signs of plagiarism or if it was, previously published, if the call does not permit that again. So for this episode, I want to touch base on something that sort of, I think, circles back to, I think it was episode 4 or episode 5. I believe it was episode 5, or, the one where I discussed tips for trying to get an acceptance into a lit mag or journal. So, yeah, I would say the question of the day that I'm going to pick out today is this one here. So, what are the biggest mistakes, or what are some of the biggest mistakes writers make when submitting to lit mags or journals? And yeah, so aside from the obvious one of not following the guidelines closely, not reading the call, and that's just one right off the bat that gets a lot of poets tripped up and writers, for short stories even and things like that, specific word counts and things of that nature. But I think something I didn't really cover on that episode a couple episodes back was that I feel that a lot of poets and writers in general, and even you could say human beings, the biggest mistake they make is let fear take hold of them. And what I mean by that is they sometimes hold back in their poem, right? They are oftentimes scared or, it's hard to be vulnerable in a poem, or they are overthinking things, or like questions that come to mind, what if they think this is stupid? Or, what if they, think this about me because I submitted this, you are essentially, when you're submitting a poem, especially if it's based on true events or something in your life or pointing back to that, you are, you are sharing a very personal piece, and it's hard to do that. And I think some poets, sometimes withdraw poems really quickly or too quickly because they think about things like that, or they're scared, so they withdraw the poem. And it's not necessarily because they want to publish it in a work of their own or that they want to hold on to that poem. Sometimes poets have fear, about sharing and, after submitting or beforehand even. And fear can hold you back from a lot of really great opportunities and things like that. Now, I'm not saying you have to share your whole life with a lit mag or journal or every piece and bit of it. Obviously, if your manuscript's tied to a moment in your life or things like that, then yeah, obviously. But yeah, you should only share with what you're comfortable with. But I think, again, a lot of poets sometimes hold back a little bit, some details or things like that. And they struggle with that aspect of just letting go. And fear is something that I would share personally that I often had, over the years that, and I think some things that cause that too, I think we have, it could be your loved ones, it could be friends even, or people, when they say, or even strangers, when they say things to you about your work or something like that, then you may get it in your head that, oh, they're going to think this too, or someone is going to think that, and not everyone's going to get, your poem again, or, where you're coming from creatively again, and that's okay. Again, there's so many lit mags and journals in cases where others submitted like 6 times to, various lit mags and they got all rejections, but then this one place accepted it. So it's not necessarily the case that, that your poem sucked or your story. It's just that they didn't find it suitable for that publication. But again, yeah, so don't be scared. When you're writing, I would say get in the mindset of not worrying about what others think about you. I think so many writers in the community sometimes express this, that they are oftentimes, struggle with that, what others may say about their writing or their work, right? That they are, sharing. And yeah, so if you write like, you don't have to rush when you're writing, but you should write sometimes as if, let's say the world's going to end or the apocalypse is coming, or, write like a lot of writers have said this in the past too. Write like it's your last day on the planet, right? And think about what you would actually write, not holding back, like going all out in that poem or story or manuscript even. And I think personally, when I have just let go and just like not overthinking kills a lot of, it can create some poor quality poems, when you're constantly over revising your own poem, or even under editing it, so there's a thing as over editing and under editing. So it's a struggle to really find that balance of, when to stop, right? But I think you really have to, it takes time to really get the hang of that, and it could come from, sharing your poems out. I know a lot of poets share their work out on social media and personal websites, Substacks, and things like that, and get feedback. And sometimes or you get feedback from, trusted loved ones or friends, and they give you feedback, and then you really, get a handle on when to stop editing or things to edit and not edit yourself. And even, again, lit mags and journals have feedback options. But yeah, don't be worried or scared when you're submitting into a lit mag or journal, especially if it's your first time. Think about it this way. A lot of editors, even readers, have been on the other side of the screen or still are submitting to lit mags and journals themselves. And at some point in time, I'm sure, a poet or writer, or it could be the editor of the lit mag or journal or the reading team, they were scared at some point in time in life or fearful about something they were writing, or even outside of writing, fear is a common thing for humans to face. And I think, again, a lot of that comes from, dealing with, others' thoughts and opinions on your work. And it's not necessarily constructive criticism. Sometimes we get rather, bizarre comments on our work and things like that. It's not necessarily constructive criticism. So yeah, you can't take things personal again, and you have to really stand by your work. And if you're happy with it, again, that's really all that matters. But yeah, I would say fear is something that is, poets make a mistake, letting that take over their work, and it leads to poor quality poems and really, turns your work a little bit to gray, I would say, when you do that. And yeah. Aside from that, what I mentioned, right, not following the guidelines, fear, I think sometimes poets focus too much on the form of their poem, right? It's not, again, necessary to put it in the shape of a coffee mug or the sun. You should really focus on just the lines of the poem. As I mentioned on past podcast episodes, the meat of the poem, right? And then you can toy with the form a little bit once you get that down, but it's not always necessary, right? If you're focusing on a coffee moment in life, you don't have to make it in the shape of a coffee mug. It's cool, but again, you don't have to. It's hard, to, I'll share with you guys. So I'm a very visual person. Throughout, all of my projects, I think throughout school days and, my time throughout the years in education, school and stuff, I was always someone who always tried to include drawings. I used to do a lot of cartooning. I used to make comic panels for my history projects and things like that on those, large display science boards. And used to do that for like extra credit assignments and stuff. And I always used to have at least some sort of image to start some of my papers or essays, or somewhere incorporated in the, not always, but if it was, not permitted. But, I used to get comments, some, a lot of my teachers in the past were always very supportive of, and had nothing but good comments to say about my, drawings and my visuals and, pairings and designs. But there were cases where others were, perhaps saying, they didn't like it at all, or, to stop putting, visuals with things. But that just helps me focus. It's something that helps me, I don't do that for poetry submissions per se myself, put an image with every single poem or anything like that. No. The poems sometimes, again, can stand alone and be the visual. And yeah, I've typically always just submitted poems and done, with our Lit Mag journal, I do, our digital collages for the online section, and then, work with other artists for other parts of our series. And we're going to really strive to, get other artists involved in, our relaunch and things like that. So I think that's going to be really cool. But yeah, I really enjoy pairing poems with, it could be photography or, visual designs and digital collage art. I really think digital collage art's cool. I, stopped cartooning because of some things that happened to me physically. So digital collage art was like at most is what I could do. And yeah, so I've had, instances where, outside of the writing world where someone's like, your resume, it looks like you want to apply to a graphic design role, not this writing role. And they were basically saying they didn't like the creativity of my resume, which was, I never had that comment before, so I thought it was kind of bizarre. And I was focusing on my, instructional training, technical writing background, and all the guides I made, in the IT world. And still they didn't like it. So what I did, I sent it back to them. I applied again with a plain resume, and then they had me move forward. But that was kind of bizarre. I just don't know why that was like such a huge deal with them, because it wasn't for anyone else. But that's what I'm just saying as an example. Not everyone's going to, feel the same way about your creativity, and you can't really take it personally again. And you have to just let things go when it happens. You have to just think about not being scared. Others are always going to have their comments or thoughts about your work, but you, again, should absolutely stand by, whatever you're making. It could be a resume. It could be, a project outside of poetry, right, or something, you're working on. Stand by your work. And every poem, every short story, every manuscript has room for improvement, and you shouldn't get upset fast when you get a decline. Everyone gets sad, when they get a decline, but you shouldn't let it, eat you up inside, rejections and things. It can be hard, if you get hundreds upon hundreds of rejections, but if you keep trying, I'm saying you're bound to find a home for your work somewhere if you keep trying. And again, I mentioned some other ways in the earlier parts of the podcast of, what to do, if rejections are happening for like long spans of like 5-6 years or a very long time, not necessarily 5-6 years, but a very long time for you, things you can do to share your work and stuff like that. But yeah. So a lot of writers, I think sometimes rush their submissions to last minute, and they don't really check things. And I wouldn't recommend doing that, because sometimes lit mags or journals have in their guidelines saying, after hearing a decision from us, you have to wait for the next window, or you can't submit to us after X amount of, months, or, things like that. Some places have that. So you want to make sure you are, carefully, look over your poem before submitting, and don't sit staring at it for like 10 hours or anything like that. But look at it, don't rush things, take your time, and don't hold back. I think a lot of poems change, completely when you just are, completely honest. Again, if you are scared about certain topics, you're writing about, or family members, reading it, friends or things like that, just use a pen name, that's totally okay. But don't be fearful or scared. As a lit mag or journal editors and readers, we see a lot of rather personal moments shared in poems and dedication pieces, absolutely. And yeah, so know that it's hard to write about those things, things that are tied to things that actually happened to you or those and so you should really just take your time. And of course, if you're like tight on time and the deadline's nearing, right, it may not be as polished as you want it to be, but, try to, look it over just one more time before, sending it off, right? I've caught things, last minute too, and some places are totally cool with opening it for editing, but not all. Some are like, it's final once you submit it to us and you can't change anything. So, yeah. And just minor things like, like a typo or forgetting something, or sending the wrong submission. It happens sometimes when you're rushing. So, some places are completely understandable about that, if they haven't reviewed it already and it's just sitting in their queue and it hasn't moved to in progress or anything, yeah. I think that's all I wanted to really share, in terms of mistakes poets make and things like that. Obviously, grammatical errors, but a lit mag journal is not going to reject your piece because there's a couple typos in it, if anything, typos make your submission more human, and we all do that. I myself make typos all the time. And, it happens to all of us, typos and grammatical errors. But, yeah, so don't stress too much about that. And, it's easy to, get in that mindset of being scared, starting writing at any age, for the first time or submitting to places, can be scary. But once you get into that, once you get your first acceptance and, then you feel like, I think others often get into that groove of like submitting, becoming more comfortable with it. And you shouldn't, I think something I made a mistake with a lot of times with withdrawing too early, because I was like, maybe I shouldn't. It actually happened, I was like, maybe I shouldn't have written this or, things like that. But I ended up, resubmitting it elsewhere and it landed somewhere actually. So, and yeah, so I got an acceptance on one of the poems. So yeah, sometimes you just have to, pause and let go and just like relax, about it, your submission when you send it off, and don't worry too much. I know some poets constantly check their statuses and submittable or wherever you're submitting, if it's not via email, and to see the decision of it. But yeah, fear is a huge thing. I'll reiterate again. It just I think it's held back. I'll share if you had I not let fear get to me. I think some things in my life would have been completely different, like path-wise. Fear can stop us from doing things we actually want to do. Like it could be publishing your first poetry book, or moving to a new place, or pursuing an opportunity that you actually would have possibly ended up loving, and you never know the outcome. You have what ifs because you let fear get a hold of you. You're like, what if I had submitted to that contest? What if I had done that? What if I had not been scared to submit to it? So don't get in that habit of letting fear overtake your work and your writing and anything you do in life. It can really be a downfall and hurt you. It can hurt you. All that worrying and fear and stress about things, it can just really, it does more harm than it doesn't help you at all. So yeah, I just wanted to take the time to, put an extension on that podcast episode. I think it was episode 5 or one of the ones nearby, tips for getting a literary mag journal acceptance. And oftentimes, word choices, I'll just tack this on. One last thing, guys. So word choices too. I see poets use too common word choices, sometimes things that are too commonly said, like once in a blue moon or blue moon things. That's come up a couple times, or, similes that are very, very common. And, yeah, so I think what helped me, over the course of my, writing journey as a human being, something I used to do, I'll share with you guys, is I've really heavily used thesaurus, or, thesaurus. And used to look up alternate ways and words for, different words. What other words mean this? What other words mean that? And I think that really helped me, in my writing. That's something I do a lot, look up alternative words, and learn, new words too. So I think it's helpful to grow and expand your your knowledge always to keep reading, keep growing. And so common word choices, things like that, things devoid of detail and descriptiveness, that can hurt your piece. But again, your writing doesn't have to be super, super long to make an impact, right? Bite-sized poems, bite-sized short stories, they can totally really have a tremendous impact and move others if they are written with very great, not very great, but I mean have wonderful and very vivid word choices, so think about that, other ways to say something, and take a common sentence you say and flip it on its head or change it completely. Don't just, I'm not saying you can't go with the first thoughts in your mind for your poem, but think about other ways to say things that perhaps are a little bit too common. Like, I looked at the yellow sun, right? That's just too bland, think about other ways to reword that and to really highlight it beyond that, So, yeah, I hope that helps you, this episode, a little bit. And I'll talk about in the next episode, I think, some print-on-demand services that lit mags and journals perhaps use. Not all of them, of course, but I'll cover some of the ones I've leveraged and maybe do 1 or 2 episodes or a couple on those and go from there. And we'll hop around different topics from time to time, but I hope this helps you, me sharing things. And don't have fear, don't be scared. If you've never submitted to a place before, go for it. And and if you're thinking about writing a very personal poem or anything around that, go for it. But again, it's okay to, just be comfortable with what be comfortable with sharing what you can. You don't have to overshare every bit of your life to a lit mag or journal, but it's okay to share, if you feel comfortable to do so. Don't feel pressured to do that, to try and get an acceptance or anything like that. It's totally okay to write fictional poems inspired by events in your life, and it's totally okay to do that or write under a pen name, the true poem, based on true events and things like that. So don't feel pressure again to really do that or to be very, very personal and vulnerable if you're not ready to do that. It's okay. Take your time. And when you're ready, or if you want to one day, you totally can. But I just would stress, I would just stress, I take that back. I would just say, don't wait too long, right? I'm just going to say this, tomorrow's never guaranteed. Life is short. So if you want to do something, go for it. Don't let fear hold you back, especially in the writing world and publication space. If you want to start your own lit mag or journal, just go for it and don't be afraid. You'll learn along the way. You may have, some hiccups, some hurdles along the way, but everyone does. So don't be scared to try new things, to do new things, to really put yourself out there. Sometimes you may be surprised the impact your work has on someone. It could be one person, it could be multiple. You never know who's going to come across your work or maybe reading it, So yeah. I know for a lot of poets and writers, writing changed their life. It even maybe saved their life, or it made them think about their life in a new way. And some absolutely fell in love with poetry or writing, and it really changed their life. Or some started a career around it, writing because of submitting to lit mags and journals, or even eventually maybe applying to a position on one or a publication and slowly moving their way through the publication in different roles. So it's possible. You just got to, keep trying and stick through it, whatever you're working on, whatever you want to do. So yeah, take care, guys. P.S. guys, I know I have so many P.S. notes on these podcasts. You're like, OMG, Jazz. And, I'm totally okay if you guys calling me either or my pen name or my, my nickname. But if I know you, in the community or your friend or, I typically prefer Jazz, my nickname. I just use my pen name because it's, it separates things from other stuff I'm doing, So, yeah, anyways, I want to share again. So not just writers, I feel like artists also, in general. They let fear hold them back from submitting their artwork or sharing. And yeah, so a lot of artists, perhaps it's not necessarily in their closet or their attic, or, some human beings have work that's just sitting, because they're just simply too scared to share it, or they just don't feel like sharing it yet because they're worried, and it's, again, tough, to put yourself in front of others. It's not necessarily social media. Even that's scary, sharing your workout on social media, on an app, and other places. I think, again, what helped me become comfortable with sharing my work is that I started on various online platforms. I shared this in an episode, but I want to share it again. So, I was part of some writing and art communities. DeviantArt was the first one I ever joined. I deleted my original account, had all my artwork originally and stuff, but I made a new account, and I'm trying to gradually add everything back, some of my older works and stuff. So I might, set aside time to do that. But DeviantArt was a very cool space. I used to comment on others' pieces. They used to give me feedback on mine. And it was a lot of really great positive comments, because, I think sometimes, it helps to hear, a comment from someone, and if it's obviously, negative comments sometimes hurt, right? They sting, but don't let them. I got a lot of, various feedback from just starting to put my work out there under different usernames and pen names and things like that. Then eventually I shared my name, and so that may help you, joining an online community. There are several out there, for artists and writers. It doesn't necessarily have to be social media, but DeviantArt also has, writing capabilities as well. And not writing capabilities, but sharing writing out there, different categories and things like that. And also Figment was one I joined, but that one's discontinued, and then it was called Underlined, and that one I think might be restructuring. I can't remember. Wattpad is one that's still around. It's been a while, for a long time, and there is also a couple other ones in existence. All Poetry, I think Hello Poetry is another one. Several poetry sites exist where you can just post poetry under a username and, get feedback on it and stuff. And that may help you, gradually sharing your work in an online site or stuff. All Poetry had this cool thing, allpoetry.com, where you would submit your poem or post it, and then others would give you feedback, because, before you can have your poem published on their site or posted on their site, you have to give feedback to other writers, at least 3, I think. And I think that was a really cool structure, so they're ensuring that other writers get comments and feedbacks on their work, and I think that's really nice. Not all sites have that, and I think that was really unique about it. There are some mobile apps out there. Poetsizer I was on, briefly, and I just started sharing all kinds of work and stuff, and I ended up putting some of those poems in collections and stuff. I don't use Poetsizer anymore. I'm not on there, but there are other apps out there that let you do that, and it may even help you, to strengthen your writing. Maybe I'll cover this in a separate episode, actually. Yeah, so I'll skip that, but ways, we'll go over that. And but I just want to share that again. Artists also face that fear that they're of what others think about their work, and and so it may help you, as an artist writer, to sign up to one of the online communities, do some research. There's several out there, to start sharing your work out there in bits. Just keep in mind that a lot of lit magazine journals, right, they consider things online already, or shared out there as previously published, so they won't accept it most places. But there are some out there that actually do allow previously published work and don't mind that. But so just be mindful about that if you're going to do something like that. That's all I wanted to add. A lot of great communities, online communities, helped me. Inkscape, Figment, ones that used to exist. There are new ones out there now. I haven't really been on one in quite some time, online writing community wise, because I've been focused on, Dippity Lit Mag and Dippity Press, but I have accounts to some still. And so check that out, look at those. Some of those online writing communities have some cool events and some things where they publish anthologies or things of that nature, or have contests. So that's a lot of fun. I used to enter, a lot of the cover design contests. Not necessarily cover design contests, but in Figment used to have this like in our discussion boards, and there were contest categories where poets, not necessarily poets, but writers in general, over, their novel drafts and their stories, they would request a listing in the discussion, here, calling all, those interested in cover design. I'm looking for a cover for it. So, and then you would post your designs in there, and they'd vote and choose the winner. And then I ended up having others request, cover art designs for me and things like that. And yeah, so that was fun. So you may have a lot of fun in a writing community or space of some kind, sharing your work, commenting. You may, connect with others through that. There are, some poetry apps out there where you can post your work and then others give you a rating. What was that site? The one where others post a rating on your work. I think let me look it up for you guys really quick, because I want to share that one. It was, so not All Poetry. I just mentioned that one. That doesn't have, they do have a mobile app, by the way, All Poetry, but only on Android. But there's another one. Oh yeah, it was Poem Hunter. I found it. Poem Hunter was the one. So yeah, Poem Hunter is interesting because, you can create a page for your poetry and start posting your poems, and then it goes out to their mobile app, and then others give it a rating. And let's see what my rating, guys, is. I don't care if you guys know what my rating is. Let's see. Poem Hunter. I have to go back to here. Poem Hunter, my pen name, and here we go. So a lot of these were poems that were just for fun, and LOL ones that I had, from Poetsizer, that I took down and I put over here and published in some of my other rando collections, I'd say. I would just like to take my mind off of some things I was going through at the time physically and, life event wise. But yeah. Anyways, my rating, it looks like it's 4.33 now. I think it was 3 something a year ago. So I haven't posted on here in like a year or two, or nearly quite some time. I might post some other more current poems on here that I don't mind sharing. So yeah, don't worry a whole lot about ratings if you get like a 1-star rating on every single poem or things like that. But that's a way to get like feedback on your work too, I think, a rating. Obviously, I think they have a comment feature on their site. I can't remember. But yeah, anyways, that's one way to get some feedback on your work without like paying, the feedback fees to lit mags and journals. Some have free feedback windows and stuff, but I think it's cool, online writing communities, other writers helping each other, giving comments and feedback and thoughts. That was something that really helped me, and, keep going, those comments from others in the communities I joined online over the years. So highly recommend you check it out. DeviantArt, I think, still going strong. They have a very large, community space for writers and artists. You can like watermark your work and stuff. And I had some, things where others would I didn't realize that others could download, my work at some point in time. So I think one of my fan art Snoopy drawings ended up getting several thousand downloads or something. It was insane. I was like, oh my gosh, what did everyone do with this Snoopy art that I drew with my computer mouse? Of Snoopy sleeping on that house, that scene. And I recreated it with drawing on my computer mouse, and there were several thousand downloads when I went to check it in the field. I was like, OMG, guys, things like that. So yeah, just double check your settings and things like that if you're sharing art and stuff. And online, and some platforms have AI content scraping again, so you want to be mindful about that. There are ways to prevent that, or try to minimize the likelihood of your work getting caught in the AI by that. But it's really hard to avoid. AI is everywhere now, so it's unfortunate. But yeah, anyways, yeah, I hope that helped you. So those were just my thoughts on some mistakes writers and artists make when submitting to lit mags or journals, besides what I mentioned on, episode 5, I believe, or it could be 4 or 5. I think it's 5. But yeah, listen to that episode back if you haven't too. And by the way, guys, I'll share, I did add these episodes to a month or so ago, or almost 2 months ago, I think, to a couple other places like Substack. So I've been making some guides for some of these episodes that you can check out. And they're not for every single episode, but just like outlines of pros and cons and some lists and some screenshots now and then. So that may help you if you don't, I know not everyone prefers solely audio. So I do that from time to time. I have some others I haven't shared out quite yet too. So, if you want to check those out, they're under, I made a review section and other tools section out there. There's nothing under my list section quite yet, but that may help you too to refer back to or bookmark besides these, audio episodes. So take care, guys, and have a wonderful, rest of upcoming days and everything. Yeah, I hope, you have a great rest of your day. Yeah.